Welcome to the Cyclical Doula podcast. I'm Emma, a certified fertility awareness educator, miscarriage doula, and the founder of Emmamma LLC. This space is for women who want to understand their bodies deeply, not just memorize information, but actually feel confident in interpreting their cycles. Here, we talk about ovulation, hormones, cervical mucus, basal body temperature, and all that messy in-between emotional layers that come with being a woman. We talk about trying to conceive, avoiding pregnancy without hormones, postpartum transitions, pregnancy loss, perimenopause, and everything in between. Because body literacy isn't just about charting. It's about the autonomy. It's about informed consent. It's about not outsourcing your reproductive decisions to guesswork or fear. Each week, you'll hear conversations with women's health professionals, birth workers, educators, and researchers, along with solo episodes where I teach practical skills you can apply to your own cycle right away. If you have ever felt like you should have learned this information sooner, if you have ever felt disconnected from your cycle, if you want to raise the next generation without shame around their bodies, you are in the right place. So grab your tea, open up your notes app, and let's build cycle confidence together.
Welcome to the space where cycles breathe, where the real raw life of Emmamma leads, from motherhood's highs to charting the low. Your body's story is the star of the show.
Well, welcome back to the Cyclical Doula podcast. This is the real, raw, charted life of Emmamma. I am currently sitting here on the beach while my daughter is at dance class. Alex, my husband, is home with my son, and so she has an hour and a half dance class, so the beach is like 15 minutes away from there. Decided to just come sit, which I'm super excited about, and I hadn't been to this part of the beach that I'm on, so it's pretty cool. Today I wanted to just share a little bit more about what I think is really important when you're trying to decide what you want to use, like how to choose a fertility awareness-based method, and if it's like the right season for you to do so. A few things come to mind. First being like what even is a fertility awareness-based method versus like just charting your menstrual bleeds? Like, what's the difference between that? So a fertility awareness-based method is using research that has been studied about fertility biomarkers like cervical fluid, basal body temperature, and urine metabolites, and being able to use that information to know when in a cycle you're fertile and when you're not. So before ovulation, sometimes there's a part of your cycle that you can be infertile, like right at the beginning of a cycle, but it depends on the specific individual. And then there's a part of your cycle that you are potentially fertile, meaning like there could be signs that there is fertility. And then there's like the actual time that ovulation occurs, which is the only time that you can get pregnant. Cervical fluid can keep sperm alive for multiple days up until then. So that's something to keep in mind. And then after ovulation, you can't get pregnant for the rest of the cycle. You might already have been pregnant, but you can't get more pregnant. And so with that, you're using different biomarkers to open and close that fertile window, depending on the method that you're using, depending upon what you're tracking, depending upon what you feel comfortable with. So when we talk about tracking cycles, we mean from the start of one bleed to the next bleed, but only when we know the ovulation has taken place in that. If not, it's just one big long cycle. So that happens more often than we realize, that a lot of people have one big long cycle because they're actually not ovulating. Those are some things to keep in mind. So with that, depending upon what feels right for you, some of these biomarkers might feel better to track than others. And so a huge part of figuring out which method's going to work best for you is figuring out which biomarkers you're willing to track. So like I said, cervical fluid, any good fertility awareness-based method or natural family planning is going to have you track cervical fluid. It might be in different ways, but that's going to be a key. Some methods are going to have you look just at cervical fluid as the only biomarker. Those are going to be things like Billings, creatine. Those are going to be looking at cervical fluid only. But you can track cervical fluid in multiple different ways. So you can track it with sensation, which just means like general awareness of what you're feeling at and around the vaginal entrance. And then you can track like physical cervical fluid when you go to the bathroom. You can track cervical fluid just like some people track it on their underwear depending upon the specific method. And then you can also track the cervical fluid at the cervix itself. So some methods use actual cervix checks, which you can also check the physical changes of the cervix as well. So that's an additional biomarker. You can check the cervical fluid at the cervix. And so those are all different ways that you can track cervical fluid. And again, different methods are going to have you track that differently. I love that Fertility Knowledge Collective protocol, which is one of the ones that I teach. We really don't have to do any like touching or stretching, or we don't do cervical checks. Like it's all based on sensation. So awareness of what you're feeling in the vagina and at the vulva, and then just like anything you see visually. So things that are in the toilet when you wipe, on your underwear, all of those things. So that's really, I prefer that aspect of it. I also teach SymptoPro, and SymptoPro has you check to see like the stretch and the coloration and what it feels like, the tissue observation. You can also check at the cervix. So there's all of those extra things. So again, like there's so many different ways that you can track these. And this is why sometimes it comes down to like how well a method will work best for somebody, because some methods are going to have you just like have awareness of throughout the whole day and then write down what you feel that's the most fertile. Other times, like you're writing down how many times you experience something and way more specific about what you're seeing. There's multiple aspects to doing this, and that's where it sometimes gets a little tricky. Trying to figure out how you're willing to track cervical fluid is going to be a good starting point. Lots of methods out there are going to have you like use your own words, or I guess few are going to use your own words. So like Billings is going to have you use your own words. Fertility Knowledge Collective is going to have you use your own words to track cervical fluid. And then there's other ones that have like just a few amount of categories like FEM and SymptoPro, SensiPlan. Those have a few categories, and then there's ones that have a lot. So like Creighton has a lot of different categories for cervical fluid. Obviously, I didn't mention all the methods in there. There's so many different organizations out there that have different methods. If you are interested in other ones, like feel free to look into those and to see what the biomarkers are. So the next biomarker that I want to talk about is basal body temperature. So basal body temperature, when it's studied, we're looking at the waking temperature. So like our body's resting temperature overnight, and we want to take it as soon as we wake up so that we have that knowledge of what this temperature is that's your body at rest. And with that, the like standard is to take your temperature either orally, vaginally, or rectally when you first wake up, and have that be at a consistent time each day. Now, each method that uses basal body temperature has different guidelines around what that looks like. SymptoPro gives you like an hour and a half window. Fertility Knowledge Collective suggests that you get as close to the same time as possible, but like look at what your deviations look like. Other methods are going to just say like take it when you wake up regardless, which is definitely the best thing to do if you happen to sleep in. And then other methods are going to be able to let you use wearables because they have seen the research that's coming out with those. And so Fertility Knowledge Collective, it's good with using TempTrap, which is a wearable on your arm. It takes multiple data points throughout the night while you're sleeping and then uses some algorithm to average them and give you that temperature. So that's an option for people who are in a season that they don't feel like they can temp orally, or vaginally or rectally, that they could use a wearable. I would strongly suggest something like a TempTrap over some of the other wearables, mostly just because there's been more research so far out there. So if you're using it to avoid pregnancy, that's going to give you more effectiveness because of the capacity of that. With that being said, some people have found that things like the Oura Ring correlate really well to their oral temperatures. I will say I used to say that until this past cycle when I was traveling multiple time zones, and I feel like I got no useful data with my Oura Ring. And so I have like a general trend, but it's not exactly what I would want to use for reliability. So that could have just been me in a weird cycle, but when I was trying to use it as like my primary for this cycle, it did not feel reliable. So something to consider if you're trying to avoid pregnancy. And then, so I think those are kind of easier. I feel like for most people, getting into the habit of taking your temperature daily seems really stressful, but it really comes down to being much easier than we expect. Once you build that habit, you can get right into it and take it regularly. If you're somebody who looks at your phone first thing in the morning, put your thermometer on top of your phone. A friend of mine had suggested like scrunching your thermometer to your phone so you don't throw it across the room, which I think is a great plan. And go and just get in the habit. There's some basal body thermometers that are going to like Bluetooth to your phone so that it has the timestamp and the temperature on it, which can be helpful. That's the type that I use because I don't like writing it down first thing in the morning. But you can get a really just like basic basal thermometer from like the drugstore. It's going to cost you like $10, $15 and it's going to do the same thing. So that's something to consider. You do need to maintain your thermometer, whichever one you purchase. So having batteries or a charger is going to need to be on hand. And then lastly is urine testing. So a lot of people choose not to do this based on the expense of the urine testing strips. So the easiest one to track is LH. And there's some guidelines around when to start testing that and how long to test that. So that's something to keep in mind. There are some really cool technology coming out like Marina and Anito and Prove that all test all of these different things. Those testing strips are so much more expensive, and that's something to consider because you don't really need that information in that detail. Methods like FEM use LH testing strips, and those can be really effective. And so there's certain guidelines about how to use that for closing the fertile window. And so those are really good options. And so, yeah, so other than like choosing which biomarkers you want for your method, the other thing that you're going to need to think about is how you actually want to learn and what kind of support you need going forward. So you can learn all these different methods from books, from online courses that are pre-recorded, from a live course online, from in-person courses, from working in groups or working one-on-one, or having some stuff pre-recorded and some stuff live, and like all of these different things. So you have to think about how you learn best and what kind of support you need to learn best and go from there. So working with someone like me, like once you purchase a course, you have lifetime access to me through messaging. And then like also like we can schedule something additionally whenever you want. And if you join my matriarch program, I have weekly office hours. So you can literally hop in whenever you want to just ask a question and show me your chart and get feedback and also maybe learn something from somebody else. But when some other courses, like you're going to learn online and maybe email somebody once and that's it. And depending on how you learn, like that might be really good. And sometimes that's not going to feel enough. So that's something for sure to consider. And then the other thing is to consider is if you want to chart on paper or in an app, and to make sure that the method that you choose is going to let you do which one you prefer. Some of the methods, organizations specifically, don't use one or the other. And so that's something to consider when you're making that choice. And then lastly, I think a huge part of this that a lot of people kind of come into is that they either want their method to be religious based or they do not. And so that is why I am certified in two different methods, because SymptoPro is a Catholic organization and it has Catholic morals and values in their materials and in their recommendations. And then Fertility Knowledge Collective protocol is completely secular. So it has the same exact science information, but it doesn't have those morals and values in the materials at all, which, like, obviously your morals and values, whatever they are, can be within whatever information. But if that's going to be feeling better for you one way or the other, that's something to really consider, especially if you're working with somebody who's not me and cannot like be able to reach people where they're at. So definitely something to consider that that's going to be influenced. The recommendations, though, for most of these methods is going to be abstinence in the fertile window when you're starting, or at least like abstinence as you're starting in general, so that you can know your body the best. And then possibly if you're in a standpoint that using other barrier methods is good for you, you can use something like condoms or withdrawal or other methods in the fertile window if you're avoiding pregnancy but still want to use those days. And so that's something to consider as well, what that would look like, because then, for example, if you're using a condom in the fertile window, like that is literally the only time that a condom's going to fail. And so you're relying on that effectiveness of that particular barrier method or other form of contraception. So that's something to consider as well as you're thinking about the effectiveness. Speaking about effectiveness, most of these methods are quite effective. And if you'd like some resources about that, feel free to look in the show notes. I'll try to link some resources there. Yeah, I think that's it. As you're listening to this, what other questions come up for you? What information do you need to know to make a decision about charting, and what feels like the thing that swayed you one way or the other? I would love to know. So either send me a DM or write a comment on one of the blog posts on my website, things like that. I would love to know just to support you. And if there's other questions that come up as you're listening to this, feel free to reach out and I can do another episode about them. Hope you're having a great day and I'll see you next time. Thanks so much for being here today on the Cyclical Doula podcast. If this episode resonated with you, the most powerful thing that you can do is to share it. Send it to a friend, text it to your sister, forward it to that group chat. This is how conversations about our bodies start changing. Quietly, organically, woman to woman. If you are listening and thinking, okay, I want help applying this to my cycle, I offer free cycle clarity calls. It's a relaxed conversation over Zoom where we talk through your goals, your charting practices, and what kind of support that would actually make sense for you. You can book one at emmamma.com/free. And if you haven't already, make sure you're following or subscribe to the Cyclical Doula podcast so that you don't miss future episodes. And if you feel called to leave a rating or a review, it genuinely helps more women find this work. So thank you. You deserve to understand your body. You deserve to feel confident in your reproductive choices. And you don't have to figure it out alone. I'll see you next week. Thanks for being here.
Welcome to the space where cycles breathe, where the real raw life of Emmamma leads. From motherhood's highs to charting the low, your body's story is the